I'm Sir Flowbojan Thunderhammer.
And I'm Teflon Frosthammer.
And I'm Cabbage Tidehammer.
And this
is
WAK.
If Amtgard knighthood means anything, you can't knife a motherfucker and keep it.
And the thing that people need to understand essentially about arts and sciences events is that your scores don't matter.
Do you want a black phoenix or a white phoenix?
Jeez, language, man. We're on
right.
a freaking podcast, for fuck's sake.
Mind-blowing experience, right?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to WAK, where we discuss topics important to the Kingdom of Winter's Edge, interview the Amtgard community at large, talk with interesting people from around the foam fighting world. This week, we have Anatole on, and Anatole, I'd like to congratulate you. You are our first guest of the new year, and we are focusing on one belt every month. This month for January, we're going to be focusing on sword belt for the first part of it. Sir Anatole, thank you so much for coming on.
I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, if I could get started, could you tell everyone how you got into Amtgard?
Yeah, I got into Amtgard from, my story is going to be almost exactly the same as Sir Randall's story, just like 10 or 12 years later. Same Renaissance fair in Las Cruces. I saw it. I thought to myself, oh my God, this is the thing I've always wanted to do for my whole life. My whole life being, like 13 years at that point.
Yeah.
Right. And I picked up some sticks and I fell in love, and the rest is history, really.
Okay, really cool. So you are in New Mexico, Kingdom of Dragonspine with Randall. And how long have you been playing now?
I'm coming up on, this November was 20 years. 20 years this past November. And Randall's down in Las Cruces, so he's in southern New Mexico, which is where I started as well. That's where I grew up. And now I'm about 4 hours north in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you guys find excuses to play together often? I mean, not lately because of everything, but in normal times, do you guys find reasons to get together? Yeah, I'll
go down to Las Cruces and go to that park, which, that's my home park. It's a very I have a soft spot in my heart for that park.
Right.
But yeah, sure. We'll see each other. Probably not as much as we should, but yeah, we'll make an effort.
Okay.
Yeah, and for those listening at home too, just to kind of tie things together here, Randall was your knight. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, Randall was my knight.
I did not know that.
Is my knight.
Is yes. It's like the whole you never leave the Marines.
Is that what it's like though?
Oh yeah, that's what you have to look forward to. I'm sorry, man.
Okay, that's fine. No, that's actually really interesting. I did not know that when we spoke with Randall. That's actually really cool.
Yeah, once your knight is your knight, he or she is always your knight, which means you never are released from the obligation of giving them shit, and vice versa. So that relationship maintains.
That's fair. I could have made a worse choice. I think we're all cool with that.
Yeah.
So I know that we're going to get into when you got your belt and things like that here in a little bit, but I want to start a little earlier than that. So you are a sword belt now. How long were you in the game before you got your sword belt?
9 years, más o menos. 9 years. I started in 2000. I was knighted in 2009, which is also when I got my Warlord as well, in 2009. And the two were about 3 months apart.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And this is 2009 would be pre-award standardization too, so you got it under the old method, what I would call maybe the harder method, or was
2007 is
was it?
When standardization happened, I'm pretty sure.
I control the editing on these, so we can take that out.
You still had you still got the Warlord title, which is the hard way. I mean, regardless of standardization,
right.
That's still a big get.
What did your path to that look like? I mean, you were if you were at Randall's Park for part of that, that's a fairly large park, right?
It definitely was back then. And, parks ebb and they flow. Back then, that was the kingdom seat of Dragonspine. It was, we just actually, the kingdom just passed, I think, one of the last amendments to one of the last, or maybe there's another one coming. But I think it's the last one to make it a floating crown. So we were one of the last two static crown kingdoms in Amtgard, and just this past weekend passed the amendment. We've been in the process of transitioning to a floating kingdom for a while now. So that's a big milestone for us. But back when I was playing in Dragonspine, it was the kingdom seat, and I did qual by getting 4 tournaments. I didn't get my 21 streak till actually after I was a warlord. Up until that point, I had only streaked 20. I was missing the one. Oh my God. And it's even worse. It's even worse because it was he wasn't my page or my squire then, but it was my to-be eventual squire, Shion, that stopped me on my 21st win. So I was at 20. Oh. I won the tournament. I think that one was my 4th. So that's how I qualified. But what was my path up until then? I was an office guy. I was an office and service guy. I was Randall's squire. Before that, I was Randall's page. I was really into the office service part of Amtgard. And I really only fought because there's just nothing else to do in Las Cruces, New Mexico. There's nothing else to do,
Yeah, and I noticed that here on your Amped Wiki, which whether or not it's up to date, we can never say. But you've served basically you've served basically every office role, right? In Dragonspine, you've got GMR, King, Champion a few times, it looks like.
Yeah, I've done everything at least twice, man. I was King twice, Regent a handful of times, Champion a whole bunch of times, and I love Champion also. That's my favorite office.
Right.
But GMR, BOD, and then when I moved to Santa Fe, I did a bunch of I helped run a park there or here. Did sheriff, but yeah, I was like an office nerd. I really liked making battle games. I really liked running, the kingdom and taking a part in that. I really didn't think about fighting seriously till I got my warlord.
What the fuck?
Interesting.
Hold on.
I was all set up to have the. So when did it change to fighting being an important aspect to shoot for the belt? But I guess it didn't exactly do that way for you.
Yeah. A lot of folks start out thinking, I want that silver stripe. So
that's a really cool thing to do, though. Was it? So you were obviously entering tournaments. It wasn't that it was. It wasn't an interest at all for you. Is this just when it shifted to being a focus?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, Flo. I came up with a lot of guys that were very, very good. Some of them, like Shion, is, a warlord and a sword knight in his own right, today. And I came up with a lot of guys that were just very had athletic backgrounds. They already played sports, and they had kind of just taken to fighting like a fish takes to water, So I had always assumed that, those guys would be the guys that got the silver stripe and got warlord and everything like that. I was just kind of there, right? But by being there somehow through osmosis or anything, and we also fought. We just fought all the time. I went to high school with these guys in the parking lot of my high school at lunch. We sparred 5 days a week, then we'd have fighter practice 2 days a week. Then we would go to the park day and fight. So I was, like I said, there is nothing to do in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Okay.
I mean, this is proof though that, enough practice will eventually make you good at something. A lot of people think, I'm not naturally a talented fighter or, whatever. And it's not the case, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's practice, and I think it's also having the right kind of environment around you, right? Mm-hmm. We were very, very lucky and very privileged to have leaders in our AmpGuard community like Randall, like Azrael Jade, that sort of made AmpGuard a very safe place to be and open up their homes for a bunch of really stinky, scruffy teenagers. It's a testament to what being able to provide that space can do for young kids, right?
Right. Hold on 1 second here. I am fixing my notes. I have done something horrible and they've all exploded, and now I'm in hell. Sorry,
I hate to hear that for you. So you guys were practicing quite a bit back then. Just to kind of close up this loop on early Anatole, you guys were practicing quite a bit back then. This led to you, and you mentioned Shion also coming up, but were there other members of that group? I know that your company, Wheel, has a lot of people that are around your age in it. Is this, you all kind of formed this as you were coming up?
Absolutely. Yeah. We formed Will in 2002, and that's all the guys. That's all the homies from back in the day that, we all grew up together, even prior to AmpGuard. I knew Sir Ilmrin, who was knighted like 10 minutes before I was, also a sword knight, also a warlord.
They do multiple knightings in one court, or how does that work?
Multiple knightings, same court, same night, and we were the first sword knights made in Dragonspine in 10 years.
Oh, wow.
A full decade.
Congrats, guys.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. And it was great, right? It's one of my most fondest AmpGuard memories because Kyle, Sir Ilmrin, had been one of my best friends since I was like 5 or something like that, So yeah, all those guys, we all came up together. We all fought all the time. We all loved AmpGuard. And those were the guys that I was like, they're going to be really good. They're going to be really good. And I'll be the office guy, I'll be the service guy. They'll be the the fighters and stuff like that. And some of them made it, and some of them, left the game or went their separate ways or whatever, but, still a really tight group.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Cabbage, you were getting at this a moment ago, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think really what you were getting at here is there is this idea that, I'm just never going to be as good as Sir Gillen, or I'm never going to be as good as Warlord Gunn, or something like that. And I think, Sir Anatole, you are living proof that really what it was a group of people, at times probably not even a large group of people, that got together, that fought, that likely picked up some new trick and showed it to their friends. And this was the same as the old Mystic Glade experiences.
Yeah.
We would pick up small things. We fought with one another regularly. It's really the practice and the time that you put in that can be more of a measure than necessarily the natural talent you have or wherever you start on that journey.
Flo, I think that's 100% right there. And it's not only the time you put in, but also the attitude you have and you bring to that practice, right? Like, we were all very competitive with each other. I'm not trying to say it was not competitive, but at the same time it was upbeat. At the same time it was very fun, and we weren't above goofing around or throwing weird stuff just to throw weird stuff, and having a good time, right? Because this was what we did for fun, right? This fighting thing, right. And we really didn't have anybody teaching us. That's the big thing. There were no resident sword knights in Dragonspine. There was no big bad fighters coming and teaching us anything. We all just kind of mind melded and helped each other up.
Did you guys do anything kind of structured like block strike or stuff like that? Or at 2002 or whatever, whenever I first started, we were looking at like the SKBC videos of the spin shots from Arthon and Delos and that kind of thing. What was your kind of, I guess, you said you didn't have anyone to practice with, but did you use anything online or anything like that?
The only thing I ever saw online was Delos and Arthon's advanced sword board.
Yep, that's
which, let's be honest, it's like less of a class and more like, hey, check out these cool spin shots I invented.
Yeah,
right. Like it's more of an expose, let's say, right? But we didn't do anything like that. The first time I ever did block strike was in 2009, right after I got my Warlord at GOTC. Spin took me to the side and was like, "No, come on now, here, new Warlord, let's do some block strike." and that's the first time I did block strike.
It's
and we did
funny 'cause
block
that's what he
strike, and
sounds
it
like.
murdered my forearms. Yeah, and then he just beat the shit out of me for like an hour and a half. That was it. And I since have incorporated into a lot of my training and drills and exercises now. But at that time, no, man, we just fought. We fought a lot, and we talked about fighting. We thought about fighting. And if one of us kind of, went to an event and learned a cool shot, we brought that back and we broke it down and we shared it. It was kind of like an iron sharpens iron sort of a thing,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like this is one of the things that for me, I've seen a change in, at least at a local level, but we have 2 sword nights at our park now, but there's so much less focus on shots and more focus on mechanics. So, before it was, here's how to throw a 5-1-2 or, here's the dark side or same thing, whatever. Yeah. Here are different shots that are named and here's how to throw them. And now it's much more of a, if you are positioned this way, here is, the appropriate way to respond. Is that a change in sort of styles as the game grows up, or do you think that's just because all the sword knights at my park are really old and can't throw certain shots anymore?
Well, it still might be that. It could
be both, yeah.
It can be both, but I think that's a good observation, and I think the reason that is because what is combat, right? Combat is a game of constant escalation, right? Escalation. So you have people saying, oh, okay, I'm throwing this shot this way. Well, maybe I can kind of tweak it this way. And when they tweak it, they learn something about not only themselves, but about how the shot works, right? Like you kind of have to approach fighting, I think, no matter your experience, no matter whether you're a sword knight, a 10th level, Order of the Warrior, or a 1st level, you have to be very humble when you approach fighting and say, look, it doesn't matter. I still don't know shit, right? It's a very deep well. There's so many different variables. It's chaos. It's constantly changing motion that you have to approach it with like, almost like to take like a martial arts analogy, you have to sort of take it with like a white belt mentality every time you approach it, right? Because every fight is unique. Every fighter is unique, right? There's no silver bullet. This is the one way this works. And I think that as our game and the sport of our game, that's within our game rather, evolves, we're evolving with it. And we have to evolve our vocabulary and we have to evolve the way we think about things, right?
Yeah. Evolving our vocabulary is a really interesting way to sort of put that I actually really like.
Yeah. And everybody has like, I believe that everybody kind of, because fighting is so personal, fighting is so individualized. Like I can fight with Flo and him and, we can have a conversation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking about the same things there because he has a complete unique experience that's different from my experience. Sure, there's some shared ground there, but the way he perceives maybe the way I move or shift my body weight is going to be different from the way that I'm perceiving how he does his thing, or even how I'm perceiving what I'm doing, right? So I like to use this analogy that fighting can either be an argument or it can be a conversation, right? And an argument is, not a lot of negotiation, not a lot of compromise, not a lot of trying to put yourself in the other person's seat. An argument is, people just trying to make a point. And sometimes fighting can be like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Mm-hmm. But fighting can also be a conversation. And I think one of the things that really gives me a lot of hope about where this sport is going is I see a lot more conversations happening. And as we conversate more, as we talk more, our vocabulary is going to develop, the knowledge that we have is going to spread, and lots of other people can sort of join in that experience and share what they know. Anybody can teach you anything about fighting. They don't have to be Billy Badass or whatever, right?
Right.
Anybody can teach you anything about fighting, or something rather, not anything, but they can teach you something about fighting.
Yeah,
right. No, you actually raise a really interesting point. Before, when we were actually doing Amped Guard, Sir Gillen and even Sir Flo pointed out, I have a really obvious tell when I am going to engage. And
tell him the story.
Oh God. Okay. So I was trying to go to 10 with Sir Gillen, and he basically stroked me every time. I may have taken one off of him, but I'm not going to put that on the air as a certainty. And I asked him at some point, I was like, what the fuck am I doing wrong? And he said, you have a really obvious tell. I said, oh shit. And he told me about it. He said, you're dropping your shoulder this certain way. When you're about to engage, you drop your shoulder. I said, okay, well, I'll try to work on it. And I could never figure it out, to the point that 2 weeks later, I'm like hyper focused on my shoulder as I'm trying to fight people. And Sir Flo walks up as I'm fighting somebody, and he goes, hey, Cabbage, you have a tell, right? I'm like,
I wasn't there for the first conversation, and he throws his sword down.
Sir Gillen just walks by casually like, yeah, he knows. But no, so I could not figure out what this tell was. Somebody had told me, oh, and multiple people said, oh, you're doing this thing with your shoulder. Finally, I got some footage of me fighting, just sort of inadvertently. Somebody took a video, and my fiance took a video, and I saw it. And, somebody said, that's your tell right there, that thing you just did. And I said, that's not my fucking shoulder at all. Like, that is entirely what you're pointing out is my elbow. And from that moment on, I know what it is now, and it's not as big of an issue. But there was a solid 6 months where I am like, every time I fight, I'm like, don't move your shoulder because you have a tell. Fuck, I still did it. And just like repeatedly, I was losing my mind until finally I saw it, and I was like, oh, we're talking about different things here. I get it now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's a huge resource that we have now.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
We have video. We can look at each other. We can look at ourselves and see what's going on and sort of be like, okay, I remember what I was thinking in this process. I remember what I was thinking. Let me tell you guys, Delos and Arthon's little expose on spin shots, that was it. That was all you had as far as like video resources went back then. So, video is a very powerful tool, and it's great to watch yourself in that regard, right?
Yeah. And we now have some videos too that are, I remember that Spin made one in a parking garage somewhere, and there have been several others that have been put out. Tato did a series for a while where he was doing some that really they give people a chance to break down what shots mechanics should look like by definition by some of the best minds that have played our game, and we didn't have that, right? So that was not a tool that we had available. We just hurt our shoulders and our elbows and said, well, I won't do it like that again.
Yeah, I have the bad elbows now.
Along those lines, and I'm going to interrupt Cabbage here, who looked like he wanted to ask you something else.
I did.
Along those lines, do you now have some favorite resources that you might recommend to a newer person?
Oh, fuck. That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. So more recently, especially in the last year and a half, I have been really really interested in kind of going down a rabbit hole on books about sports psychology, right? And books about training and how can you kind of be the best coach for yourself, not and for others, but also how can you coach yourself? How can you change your perspective, whether you're in competition or not? How do you treat yourself and start perceiving yourself as an athlete, right? And modify your life to reflect that, right? So right now, I've just been, and COVID is killing fighting
Yes.
everywhere. So
Gives you plenty of time to read, though.
books.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would just, if I could go back in time and I could give a 14-year-old Anatole like a single book, I would probably give him The Inner Game of Tennis, written by Timothy Galway. It's only about, I don't know, más o menos like 190 pages. It's a super quick read, but I think a lot of the principles that Galway establishes in thinking of yourself like an athlete, adopting an athlete's mindset, understanding how to progress, and understanding that progress is a slow process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're really competing with yourself, right? If I could give a little 14-year-old Anatole one book, he would probably be like, throw it away. I'm gonna be king. I don't want to be, but I would give him that resource. And now I'm kind of like almost fanatical about it. If anybody it comes up to me and they're like, well, what can I do? I highly recommend that book. And sometimes I just give them a copy. But yeah, I would definitely recommend Timothy Galway's The Inner Game of Tennis.
That's interesting. Because I've actually kind of been able to reflect on things as far as like growing up fighting and stuff too. Because I started around the same age you did. And like physically back then, I felt like I'm probably better off as far as even skill goes. But like now, I'm able to focus more on a mental game, and puts me in probably percentage-wise a better percentage than I would have been back then with other people. But I actually moved to like chess and things like that as far as the books go. So it's really cool that you went a slightly different direction with it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to find inspiration wherever inspiration comes from, right? Like if it's chess, that's fantastic. Everything that has to do with competition all ties in together, because there's only so many ways the body can move. There's only so many ways the mind can think in competition, right? So I'm a big fan of looking at other sources of inspiration, whether it's sports, games, whatever, and finding those underlying principles, right? And how can I apply it to my passion? How can I apply it to foam fighting? The big thing for me right now is disc golf. I've been playing disc golf like
Disc golf people here.
Yes. Yeah, but hey, don't you guys think? Okay, I've only been playing a few years, but don't you guys think the way that you transfer energy and turn it into rotational power, and you have to stay within the frame of your body, isn't that so like throwing a shot?
It really
like
is.
Mechanically,
The whole bracing
it is.
And the weight transfer from back foot to front foot and things like that are really, really applicable to fighting, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. And kickboxing too, and regular boxing, which I've done a little bit about. Yeah. It's all together. It's like, I don't know. I like to think of it as kind of like a martial discipline because it makes it a little less nerdy than I'm playing frisbees in the park. But,
Right.
But yeah, I think you need to find inspiration wherever. And if you're in the right mindset and if you're looking the right way, you can really draw a lot of inspiration from all sorts of things. And if nothing else, it's just going to get you thinking about fighting differently a little bit.
Yes,
you know?
Yeah, it's funny. We recently visited a park that I'm always talking about on this podcast, Buccaneers Respite, and they play on a course that's a disc golf course. So in between matches, while everybody's like taking a smoke break, Teflon and I decided we were going to go throw this hole that was like we had been staring at it for every battle game. We're like, it's right there. I could just throw my shield at it, you know. And Teflon got the craziest putt I've ever seen. What was that? 40 feet?
It was more than that. It was probably 45, 50 feet, but it was way
Straight
downhill.
up a hill. Yeah, you were at the bottom of a mountain almost.
It's not even my disc. It's a random AVR that Lucas had. And I was like, I'm just going to kind of forehand this up here and, set it down. And I managed to just throw it in for no reason. Yeah. It's windy as hell.
And it was uphill?
Oh, yeah, it was uphill.
That's tough.
Yeah,
that's
I had to step
really
out
tough.
and throw. It was bad.
I just would have tomahawked it and tried to get it on the flat side of the hill, but
I know that I've told this before, but I'm going to say it again for you, Anatole. One of my most memorable things that happened to me and Teflon at an event was when we went up to Rackus,
so good.
and Leroy was pulling in. Leaf was pulling in, and he was like, "Hey guys, how you doing?" Like, "Oh man, haven't seen you in a while." He says, "What are you doing with those discs?" I said, "Oh, we're going to go throw on the course here." He said, "This isn't a disc golf course. This is my home park." It's like, "Yeah, man, it's a world famous disc golf course." And he goes, "Oh, well, shit. Hold on just a second." He parked and grabbed his discs. Did not even go check in at the event. We just went and did 18 holes. Yeah, it's fun stuff.
Oh, that sounds like a dream.
Yeah, great.
So, okay. Well, that sounds like a dream. What was the name of this park? Buccaneers
Respite. It's in Bristol, Tennessee,
or Kingsport. It's
Kingsport,
one of the three things there. Yeah,
northern central Tennessee.
You should come out. You should come and visit, and we will do a disc golf tour. We got a lot of good
We've
parks
actually
around
got Morristown, which is real close by, is like fourth or number 4 on like the top 5 destination disc golf places or something like that. Panther Creek is apparently like some really highly rated course that's real close to us.
I'm in. I am so fucking sold right now. I am so whacked in disc golf like that. That's Valhalla.
We need
right
discs.
there.
We need to just get a disc thing and have it printed out and sell them too, and be
Oh,
great.
dude.
Oh, we could put our logo on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. That's the point.
Okay, so back to Wacks. We'll arrange the trip out here to do disc golf after we're off air.
Hell yeah.
So real quick, I've actually added a link to that book on Amazon into the show notes. So I'm going to link it there for people to check out. Also, I have my fiance making faces at me on the side of the room here because apparently Bristol is not central. Northern.
No, it's East Tennessee.
It's Eastern. Okay, everybody's going to find out geography is my weak suit. I'm just going to put it here so I don't have to do something and post about it. I suck at geography there. It was my worst class. I kind of want to get back to the sports psychology bit, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, because this is something that briefly came up when we talked with Sir Michael. And we had this conversation about people who we consider to be instinct fighters or who fight just based on, some level, it seems almost like an inbuilt talent. And then some people who are, I guess, thinking fighters. And there are classes about like the fight computer and everything. Where do you stand on that? I mean, obviously everything requires some practice, but is there some natural barrier where some people are just good at this thing and they're going to be at a better, a better place, regardless of their athleticism?
Right. So,
oh shit! Oh no!
Answer all of Amgard's fighting problems for us.
Please and thank you.
Shit. How much time do we got? 2 hours? I don't know if I can. That's a lot of.
I have a really bad habit of asking 7 questions in one question. So if you need to break that apart, please.
No, it's fantastic. It's great. It's great podcasting, I think. I try and do the same thing. It's because then you never know what you get, right? But so I kind of think that when people in the past have said I'm either an instinctual fighter or I'm like a technical intellectual fighter or whatever, I think that's more because we've lacked the vocabulary to talk about how we learn in this sport, right? Because this sport that of foam fighting, stick tag, wax, whatever you want to call it, is like a niche thing in an already like very niche nerd hobby, right? Where you don't get a lot of people that necessarily have, are like Division I wrestlers, right? Or people that have done like a ton of sports. Typically, you're going to find a lot of people who their high school sport was Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You hear that a lot on this podcast. Yeah.
And yeah. And hey, that was my high school sport too, besides Amtgard, right? Was Dungeons and Dragons. But I think what that question is really breaking down is, how does an individual learn? And how does an individual learn very quickly? And how do they think they learn, right? Because if we're in a fight and we're fighting, right, you're interpreting all this information, you're dealing with a lot of different variables, and you're having to adapt, analyze, and either react or respond, in milliseconds a lot of the time, right? Some people learn and they deal with that by having this analyzing sort of like narrative in their head, right? Well, I don't think that doesn't mean people who fight instinctually don't also do that, but maybe they're not as in tune with that inner monologue. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Maybe they're not as like totally, like understanding everything that's going on a conscious level, but subconsciously, their body is doing what it needs to do. Arthon, who I think is like in the conversation, in my mind, he's the GOAT. As much as a conversation you can have about that, and how weird that conversation gets, he's the GOAT to me.
We hear this from everyone.
He says he has, yeah, right? Harry's the GOAT. Everybody knows Harry's the GOAT. But he always says he has no idea like what he's doing. Well, that's not true. Come on, Harry, right? Like you wouldn't have been obviously you do know what you're doing. Obviously you're still, like, sure, he's getting a little bit older, but I tell you, give that guy a 38-inch sword and he's a terror. Yeah. He's an absolute terror, right? It doesn't, when he says that, it's like, come on, dude. What you're saying is you don't know what you're doing, and your prowess and what you're showing is proving you wrong, right? So I think it's easier for us to have that conversation because we lack the vocabulary of sports psychology and just like learning the science of learning and stuff. We're kind of starting to get like more of the mental stuff and incorporating that into high tier fighting, but we're all learning. And prior to this, I think we've just kind of lacked the vocabulary to be able to accurately describe that. I feel like I'm still lacking the vocabulary to accurately describe it, right?
There's whole careers dedicated in other sports to
to
putting this to words. So
like martial arts and stuff, you still come across stuff where it's hard to, like for me, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I have that background. So you have people who are like the traditional Gracie Baja guys, but then you also have Eddie Bravo, who's basically Americanized the vocabulary for it. And it's really interesting, that split. And that's a mental game split to some degree.
Yeah, and it depends on how you learn. What in your life, your experiences has taught you to learn a certain way, right? Because you do have super technical guys, on the mat that are going to be able to go from guard to half to mount. They're going to be able to feint one way, then throw up, an arm bar one way and turn it into a triangle. And they'll be able to sit there and tell you after everything, not only they did, but what you did that allowed them to get there.
Exactly.
And then you have people that just feel weight and they feel pressure and they kind of just let their body react. I mean, both these people have a skill set. It's just how you access it, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
So I think that's the big difference. And I think here's I'm just gonna like keep rambling, but here's my main problem with this like instinctual and like intellectual technical. I think it puts yourself in a box. I think when you say that, you put yourself in a box and you close yourself out to another way of learning that may be difficult. It may be outside of what you're used to, right? But the way we improve and the way we get better is by putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations and having to adapt and evolve from that, right? So when somebody says, "Oh, well, I'm totally instinctual," I was like, well, probably that's the way you feel, but also that means that you're going to more than likely put this roadblock up if I try and engage you in like a technical conversation, which you can totally do. It just may be a little difficult.
So I'm actually used to be that person. Like I used to just 100% believe I fought instinctually, but I've come to realize that it's really more I am Pavlov's dog to fighting, right? So like while I haven't thought about it in the traditional sense of analytics, right? I've positioned my hand better and better each time because I'm not getting my arm taken over and over again if it's a little bit further to the right or left, whatever it may be. So
also, every time Jeff wins a fight, we give him a pack of Smarties.
We do. Ooh, piece of candy.
But now, like that
positive reinforcement's a big thing, man.
Now that I've gotten older, I have kind of switched it up a little bit. I think more about what's going on, at least whenever I'm taking fighting seriously anyway. So it is something that you can do, and I really see your point very vividly because it's something I've reflected myself too.
Yeah, and if I could add on to that, and this is a really, really, really important point, guys. Sir Anatole said it, and I'm going to say it again in perhaps a very, very direct way. What we believe, especially about ourselves, influences how we act and how we think, period. So this idea that, oh, that guy, I'm a speed fighter versus a whatever, or I'm a instinct fighter versus a technical fighter or something like that. If you put yourself inside that box, it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have a place where you start, and that may dictate what you're good at early in your fighting career or your arts and science career or whatever you're doing, but it is not who you are. You can't define yourself as that thing. I probably would say that when I started, I was a very reactionary fighter, which I'll define here as like what we're calling an instinctive fighter, right? But very early on, I learned that that is not going to get me where I want to go. And it was from watching SKBC stuff and going to the early SKBCs and listening to these people that have been doing a lot longer than I had. Like Sir Anatole, who's actually been doing it. You and I have been in the exact same amount of time. It's so weird. But this is that line in the sand that I really, really want to draw here, guys. And I'm going to say it again. What our beliefs inform our actions, period. So do not pigeonhole yourself into this idea that I am one particular type of fighter. You are not that one-dimensional. No one listening to this is that one-dimensional of a person, and you're not that one-dimensional of a fighter. You have certain talents that you lean towards naturally, and you have things that you work on. But you can absorb information from multiple different sources, and you have to be open to all of them if you want to improve overall.
It's very inspirational.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I agree with that 100%. And you know, how many people will, I mean, if I know you guys have come across this, but like how many people when you're that ask for help, right? They want you to impart a little wisdom or help them out with a shot or give them a review or stuff. Once you start giving them advice, they say, well, I suck. Like they just break themselves down and they put this ceiling on themselves, right? Almost as if, and you're like, well, then what are we doing here? Like, if you don't want to, you know,
yeah, absolutely.
get better, you know, like you have to believe that, okay, you might suck now, right? But does that mean you just suck? Like, no, you're better right now than who you were yesterday because you're making this extra effort. And that's honestly all that competition in combat, especially if you're going to, you know, especially in the martial arts. And if you're going to be practicing for a martial discipline, hey, the main opponent is yourself. And you're just trying to be a little bit better than who you were yesterday. Sometimes it's only this much. Sometimes it's, you know, a tiny bit. But if you add up this much, and then the next day, and then the next day, and the next day, suddenly you're this much better than you were on Monday. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with that 100% Flo. And I think it is something that is very important for anybody that wants to get better at anything, not just fighting, but anything. Right.
Absolutely. You touched on it slightly right there, but like kind of bringing it back, as far as me and disc golf, it was one of the realizations that I came to playing disc golf is that I'm not out there necessarily to beat the people I'm playing with. I'm out there to beat what I was the day before. And it is a really big realization.
Yeah, 100%. And it's hard, right? It's hard in competition to do that because your ego is on the line, right? What you think about yourself. Competition is wonderful because it really separates the truth from the bullshit, right? It's separates the truth from the lie and gives you a very brutally honest picture of whatever game you're playing, right? But and so it can be easy to sort of put a face on maybe some of the challenges that you have when really, it's your own perception of yourself that's being challenged, or your own ego.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so what does this look like for the everyday amp guarder? Because I know that I have certainly been in situations where I would start to plateau. And if anyone here is newer to Amp Guard and listening or isn't familiar with the term plateauing, you reach a point where you've been getting better. You've been able to notice you were getting better. And then for whatever reason, that stops. And sometimes it can even feel like you're backsliding a little bit. You're losing to people that you're beating pretty handily before. This is going to be a part of that process. It's something that everyone has faced. So your week to week as a young amp guarder, as an experienced amp guarder, you never stop reaching this gain and plateau mentality. What do you think is something that our everyday amp guarder who's just wanting to get a little bit better at fighting could do to combat that? Again, solve amp guard's problems if you can.
So I think the very first thing that you can do is address your mindset, because if you're not in it mentally, in your heart, right, you're not going to be successful. I'm sorry. You're just not going to be successful if you are constantly associating training and fighting and competition in terms of failure and in terms of negativity. You're just beating yourself up. I don't give a damn how tough you are. There's a lot of tough sons of bitches that can withstand a lot of pain, right? And a lot of pressure and a lot of strain, but eventually that dam is going to break. Right? Because you're never going to want to keep doing a thing you hate, right? So I would say the first thing is, so here's a practical thing. Develop your language of success. Okay? Develop your language of success. This is a thing I've been trying to implement with myself, right? And I've been trying to espouse this concept. Develop your language of success, right? So instead of saying, wow, this really sucks, like let's say you're getting a workout or you're having a really tough sparring session with somebody, don't say this sucks. Say, this is very challenging, right? You need to turn that negative into a positive and reassert yourself as the protagonist in your own story, right? You're the hero here, right? Nobody wants to pay attention to a hero or to follow a hero's journey where the hero is just like whining the whole time, right? Like they want somebody who looks at a challenge. You want to be somebody who looks at a challenge and figures out a way to overcome that challenge, right? Come up with little mottos for yourself, right? Like for myself right now, my motto is conceive, believe, achieve. Conceive, believe, achieve, right? And the reason that I'm doing this is because I'm entering this mesocycle of strength and conditioning training that's going to last about like 4 weeks. And see, I almost said it's going to suck. It is going to be very challenging. It's going to be very, very challenging. But I want to be stronger. I want to be more explosive, and I want to have better conditioning. I want to conceive, right, who I want to be after these 4 weeks. Then I need to believe. I need to believe in myself that I can do that, right? I'm a public school teacher. I'm a high school teacher. And one thing that COVID has taken away from me, because we're all remote learning right now, is I had access every single lunch to a full gym by myself, right? Every single lunch, I would leave my classroom. I'd go down to the gym where the wrestlers were, the football players, and I just work out for an hour, right? Every single day. It was awesome, right? I don't have that anymore. Right. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean, though, that I still can't be making gains. Right. So I made this system and I believe in this system. Right. Now, all I have to do is achieve it. Right. So when things are getting challenging, I can tell myself, conceive, believe, achieve, establish your language for success. Right. And make sure it reinforces you positively, not negatively. That's a big one. Right. Flo, when we were coming up and when we were interacting with the larger kind of competitive community, I mean, there was a lot of that. I feel like there was a lot of that language going on. You suck, you're terrible, you're awful, right. Get good, scrub, that kind of stuff. And it was said unironically.
I refer to it as the attitude era of AmpGuard.
He does so much, and I kind of like
true,
it.
And I hate to admit it, but it's so true.
Yeah, and how many people did that discourage? Sure, there are people that met the bar, right? Mm-hmm. Then there are people that jumped over it, right, and did well. But I'll be honest with you guys. I look around since you and I came up in the same era. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of like very big Billy badasses. Like the mountaintop gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think that's not because I don't think that's necessarily because the bar got raised, but I think it's because our culture was toxic and thrived off of negativity and putting people down instead of trying to coach them up. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I really do. And I want to add one thing to your point there too, that it wasn't just the people that were sitting on the top at that time either. Unfortunately, there's this infectious negativity, just like positivity, has this way of spreading infectiously through the community. So you go back home and without thinking about it, you use that same kind of language with your friends and things like that. And you use that kind of language with new people that are coming out to the park because, they're just part of the crew now and it'll be fine. My own park experienced a big downturn because more than once.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the way that we talked to people and the types of conversations that we had with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I'll be completely honest with you guys. I thought that was the way to be, right? I thought that was the culture that I was sort of adopted into when I became a good fighter, right? So I just assumed this is the way you become a good fighter, right? And it's only now, that I realized like this probably did more damage than good, honestly, because there are a lot of people that could have been very, very good and leaders and figures in our game, that were just turned off by the negativity and the toxicity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a shame. It's a big shame.
It is.
I want to touch on something because you started talking about the language of success. And for me, that was a really big, like you said that and I was like, oh shit, that's a thing. Like, it sounds really simple, but to me it was kind of eye-opening. And I didn't think I was going to have anything to add to this podcast, but there's something, there is a term most commonly used in esports, but also it's picking up in like real sports. When there is a team that is doing poorly or, a player that is just not doing their best, they start to focus on a win condition. And this is something that I do for myself. So a win condition, obviously winning the game, that's a win condition, but if there's no chance of winning the game, Or, if winning the game maybe is not your primary goal, this game doesn't matter. Your win condition can be something different. So, for example, in Amthgard, my win condition, a lot of times I will go out to park, and my win condition for the day will be block 3 before I ever kill someone. Or something like that, right? Don't get stabbed is a win condition for me a lot of times because I'm trying to learn Florentine. And so, or don't get stabbed or get stabbed as little as possible. So in addition to like having this language of success and sort of reframing how you look at things, because it can put your mind in a pretty bad spot if you don't, I think also you can establish wins for yourself that are not necessarily Warlord, that are not necessarily take 10 off of the Sword Knight at your park or whatever. And that's a big thing for me that I've been trying to tell other people. And it just sort of the language of success ties into that in a really interesting way. And I kind of just wanted to say it out loud so it's on the podcast somewhere. But no, also bringing that back around, sort of full circle, you also talked about, how some people will put others down, and that was a thing at the time. There's an interesting, there's a few players that do it here, but in a really interesting way. They've almost made a meme out of themselves. So the one that sticks out to me most is actually in your fighting company and your former fighting company, Sir Marcosius. He doesn't directly put people down, but he's very, he's hilariously aggressive. So he will win a match and then it's like, boom, got him. Yeah. But it's almost, it is exactly so over the top that it's funny and fun. And I think there's, if you were one of those people that used to put people down, there is a way to transition that into something that is actually positive and almost making fun of yourself. So you can still, because a lot of people hype themselves up that way. And I think maybe you can transition that into something a little more self-deprecating and keep it if you need that for your mojo or whatever.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. You can tell someone's intent. Right. You can totally tell someone's intent when they're giving you advice or when they're talking to you, and you can tell if they're being malicious, right, or if they're being self-deprecating, which is a fantastic, like I really think to be a good fighter, you have to be a good coach. Okay. And you have to help bring people up because it's going to make you better. It's going to create the setting that you kind of need to get better. And you need people, right? You need people. You need that other iron that's going to sharpen you, right? And I think it's really great when people who are sword knights, who are warlords, who are badasses, kind of have enough humor in themselves to sort of, they can make fun of themselves and show them like, hey, like we're all just people here. There doesn't need to be this hero worship thing, right? So I think that's a great idea. And then just one thing you said as well about little goals. Yeah. Let me tell you, the house that is a warlord, the foundation of that house is built on those little goals, those little wins, right? Because you're making it fun for yourself. Right? You're making it fun, you're making learning fun, and you're making progress fun. Now, it may take you 1 year, it may take you 10 years, but as long as you're setting up those little goals, staying focused and keeping this thing that we're doing positive and fun, that house is going to get built. Believe that.
Yeah, it was just an example of that very thing. When SKBC came to Winter's Edge in 2016, they had a fight card system where you went up, you picked one of the fighters that was there, one of the warlords or sword knights, to spend, I think it was 10 or 15 minutes with, I don't remember the exact amount of time. And I actually chose you as one of the people that I was going to go fight. And so we spent the first couple of minutes just fighting. Not really talking, just fight. Whoever wins, we tap again. We acknowledge the win, and then we tap and we go again. And at the very end of that, you said, these are the things that I think that you're very strong in right now, XYZPQ. And here are the things that, why'd you look at me? XYZPQ is a thing.
XYZPQ?
I had the same look.
There's
Lucas,
nothing
don't feel
after
like you're
Z.
alone.
Just start at W or something. What the fuck? No one does that.
I've mortally offended.
I just like that fucked me up, man.
So you said here are the things that you're good at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that? Am I good with 1,
That's
2, 3?
way better,
Okay.
actually. Yeah.
Flo, you had me looking at my keyboard being like,
Here are the things that you want.
What kind of keyboard do you have if it's not a QWERTY keyboard, Flo?
Dvorak or something. X, Y, Z.
I use Russian keyboard. But here are the things that you're good at. Here's the things that I think that you need to work on, and here's the things. Here's the things that I think that you have, but you don't have where you need to have them. And here's the things that I did not see you doing that I want to see you doing. At no point was it phrased like you're just doing things wrong. This was more of you came to me and said, how do I get a complete package that would get me closer to a belt? Because that was how the first thing you did was say, what are your intentions with fighting, with learning to fight? And I said, I want to get closer to getting a belt. And so you were equipping me with the pieces to get me closer to that. And all of them were very fundamental type things. The things that we discussed were more foot movement in particular ways. Like I had been doing foot movement at that point, but I was doing a lot of superfluous movement. I was doing a lot of movement that took away from my shots, and I was doing a lot of movement that didn't add towards the killing blow that I needed. And so this was just to kind of reinforce some of the things that we've been discussing in this part right here. This is very much large things come from small things. The army is made up of single people, and those people become units, and those units become whatever. But you have to have those small pieces to start out with and build off of.
yeah, absolutely. And you also have to understand that it's going to be a journey. Okay. It's not so much about the destination as the journey getting to that destination, because once you get the belt or once you get the bird, right, now you're on a whole new journey, right? It's not like it stops and like, congratulations, you've reached level 10 fighter. You are now good to, pass go, collect 200. Like it doesn't end then. That's really just where another journey starts. Right. And every one of those little things that you're doing is a footstep. One step you take on that journey that brings you closer to some destination, but the destination's not really the point, you feel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good, yeah.
When we've had this conversation before too, where your belt, a lot of young amp guarders view your belt as the end goal. I know I certainly did for a large portion of my young amp guard career. But as you get closer to the belt, I think one of the things you start to realize is it was all of the things that you had to learn, the necessary skills that you picked up to get there, that is actually what you were wanting. The belt is just the symbol. It's the recognition from your peers that they acknowledge that you have also achieved this particular level.
Yeah. Well, and coming back around to the iron sharpening iron thing. I mean, obviously it behooves anyone who wants to be a sword knight to train people to be good enough to practice against and continue improving. That's actually a cultural shift that we've seen in Winter's Edge with Warlord Gun, soon to be Sir Gun. I will put a belt on that motherfucker, I swear to God. But, his initial vote, I think I have this correct. His initial vote went to the Knight Circle after he got his Warlord. I think his initial vote passed, but it wasn't by a margin that he considered good enough, or that was, he wanted to have the majority, an undeniable majority of the Circle of Knights. And one of the pieces of feedback he got was that he could teach more. And so he's actually made that a mission to, he had panels that he would do. He does a lot of one-on-one teaching. But he became a really good teacher. And now, of course, his vote passed, I believe, a second time with an overwhelming majority. So he will be a knight at some point. But that focus or that shift to, this person needs to be able to teach is a really interesting one. And one that I'm happy to see in our kingdom. Is that something that's also becoming a thing in Dragonspine? Is this, I guess I'm trying to figure out if this is isolated or if this is a game-wide cultural shift.
So again, in Dragonspine, Kyle and I were the first sword knights made there in a decade, right? Since Kyle and I got knighted, we've had Warlord Sir Shion, we've had Warlord Sir Sane come up in the same park, Warlord Firen, who's old school. For us, it was always the only way we could stay competitive and the only way that we would be able to compete, right? We did have some of the Isidra guys, Deathstalker, Firespitter, Atog, KJ that came from Alamogordo, and they would come to our park when we were very young. And to be honest, I was fucking terrified of those guys. It was like we were like happy little China, just doing our thing. And then like once every couple of months, the fucking Mongols would come and beat us into the ground and leave. Right? Like, so our great wall that we built was teaching each other, coaching each other, being like, hey man, I see you got like a little, and I love all those guys. Like I'm super tight with all those guys now. They're fantastic, but our great wall was teaching each other. So that kind of coaching culture in Dragonspine specifically has really always been there because we didn't have any other resource, right?
Okay.
We didn't have anybody, showing us what to do. It was really just figuring it out for ourselves, teaching each other, and then going to events and finding somebody, like Leroy, that would give us a little tidbit of information, right? A little bit of advice. Then we'd go back and we'd work on it for a year, which brings me actually, I want to tell a story about the triads if I can.
Oh, please, God, yes.
Oh no.
No, this is a great story. So, Flo, you guys went to a Rackus. I don't know if it was like disc golf Rackus, which I'm sad I missed, but it was a Rackus and Gillen was there. I remember that because that's when I got to meet Gillen for the first time. And I want to say you were there, Flo.
I would have been there, yeah. I was.
Yeah, because
no, it's okay.
There was a posse.
I was just that guy that was there with Tennessee and everything. This would have actually been the disc golf Rackus because
I was there for that one then.
Yeah, you were. He was the quick on our jugging team. Teflon was the quick on our jugging team. Yeah.
Hey, so okay. So we were ditching. I don't know if you guys remember this. We were ditching and the ditch kind of died. And it was kind of like, this is before a lot of the other wheels started to go out to events. So it was mostly just me. And I remember staying on the field, maybe with somebody else. I don't remember if it was just me or not, but with you guys and sparring with you guys a lot. Right. And you guys beat the shit out of me. It was bad. It was like bad. Because Randall comes up and he's the one that kind of introduced me. And he's like, hey, this is Gillen. He coulda, shoulda, would have been a Dragonspine sword knight, but like we had to do other things because y'all were Dragonspine at one point, which maybe would have changed the whole trajectory now that I think about it. But you guys just beat me into the ground. And I think I was getting a little flustered because I was trying to I was starting to become competent, but I was really just a journeyman at that point. And like you guys were beating me up. And one of you guys, I forgot who it was. It wasn't Gillen, but one of you guys saw me attempt a spin shot, I think it was. And you said, hey, that was a really good attempt. That was like a really good attempt. I think if you just do this one thing, like you're going to hit that shot. And I'm a young.
That was you, Teflon.
Oh my God. So we have met apparently.
Was it you?
Yeah, that was Teflon. It was me and Teflon were the ones that were right beside you and Gillen fighting. I remember this.
Okay. So when you told me that, right, I think at first I was like, like I was super
who's this guy?
Yeah, like, what does this guy know? Whatever. A couple fights later, I did it. It worked. And that was like a big eye-opening experience to me to be like, holy shit. Like, these guys had no reason right? Because I was still in this mentality of like, people suck, you don't encourage people. I was like, these guys gave me a little bit of information in a positive way, even though they were beating the brakes off me. And I ended up using it well. Like, it switched my whole mode of thinking about how to encourage people, right? So just from that one little interaction, I mean, it wasn't anything big. It wasn't, well, let's look at your stance, let's look at your guard. I think you told me, it's like, hey man, like your hip's a little cocked this way or something, or your weight's a little forward. Just pull that bitch back and you'll be fine. And when it worked, it was just this like mind-blowing experience, right? Because I was like, but they beat me, but I suck. Like, I'm not worthy of this, you know? But it helped me out there. And I've always like thought of that. So that's how it was in Dragonspine. And I do think, because of the cultural shifts and institutions like SKBC adopting sort of this like a rising tide floats all boats sort of mentality, I think it is getting better. And I think it is taking hold in the game at large. And it's very encouraging to see. Not to say there isn't still toxicity and things we need to fix and address, but on the whole, I think we're getting better about that.
Definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Speaking of, so I'm the guy that's gonna keep going. Speaking of and bringing up something that happened 5 minutes ago. I'm good at. I have all the notes right in front of me. So going back to this cultural shift and everything else, what's your opinion on the path to sword now? Because it's obviously different than it was. It's people are saying it's easier to get. I don't know that that's true. What's your opinion on that?
No, I think sword, as it is right now, in that you have to be a warlord to be a sword knight, I think it is as hard as it's ever been. And I don't think that's a great thing for our game. I don't think that's a great thing for our game, because I think it excludes a lot of people who could be leaders, who could be teachers, who could be pillars of the community and help be good coaches, bring other people up. I think it kind of excludes those people. And I used to be very much like a cold dead hands kind of a guy, right? Like, no, you have to do this. You have to be a warlord. But I really think that was a lot of my own insecurities projected on other people, right? Which is how toxic environments, how a lot of those environments get started in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's very hard to be a sword knight, or to get to be a sword knight, right? To walk that path. And I don't think it has to be. Warlord, I still think in my opinion, I think it should be that other thing, but I don't think it should be necessary to be a sword knight.
Kind of like a prestige title or something.
One more time. Sorry about that.
Oh, sorry. Like Warlord is almost like a prestige title on top of Sword Knight.
Right. Because you have fighters that are really good at presenting themselves well, representing Amtgard, engaging in all aspects of Amtgard, and bringing people up, teaching, right? Gun's a perfect example of this, right? Like, you have people that can do that, right? And fight very, very well, right? Mm-hmm. Then you have people who, honestly, that's not their bag. They don't want to they want to come out. They want to compete. They want to compete well and fight, but we shouldn't require those people, I don't think, to be something that they don't want to be. Just like I don't think we should require these other people who excel in bringing people up to be on par with somebody who's, essentially a crazy person, right? That trains all the time, that spars like 8 times a week because there's nothing else to do in Las Cruces. Like,
how do we cut that audio and send it to Zeb?
Right? Yeah.
So
yeah.
Sorry. This kind of brings me, there's one cultural shift that is just starting to sort of spring up in Winter's Edge, and that is specifically around tournaments. And I kind of wanted to get your opinion on this because I think the crux of the argument here is that for awards below 5th level, really, most of those can be given out at park level. And so the argument is on whether or not the kingdom should, at kingdom level tournaments, of which there are only 4 to 6 a year in a good year, should the kingdom be having bracketed tournaments like 3 and under, 5 and under, 10 and under? Or should this be something we actually give the local parks an opportunity to do, where you say, you're a barony, you can give out to 5th level, have a tournament, invite people to it. And I think Teflon has a lot more on this. I know this is kind of an issue of his in particular, so I'm going to let him explain it better while I go pee.
Fair enough. He summed it up pretty well. I can go into more semantics about it, but the general thing is there.
Are you Shalazaring us? Are you just leaving in the middle of a...
I was hoping you would buy me some fucking time.
well, okay, go.
Supposed to be more long-winded.
No.
What the fuck?
You asked the most short-winded person to be long-winded.
It's... Carry us on with this conversation. Yeah,
we'll fix it in post.
Oh, no, this is all staying in. This is all staying in.
Oh, shit. Great. Fantastic. Yeah. So I think that's a hard question to answer because so many parks can have such a wide gamut of skill.
Yes.
For example, in Las Cruces, or in Dragonspine, I guess I keep saying Las Cruces is the kingdom seat. Like I haven't snapped to the fact it's not anymore. But we have some very, very, very good fighters that in any other kingdom would be Warlord Sword Knight material. However, every time they step into a tournament, they have to fight any number of these. Myself, Shion, Sane, and Ilmrin, if Ilmrin is being active, right? So that's 4 Warlord Sword Knights that all grew up together fighting each other. And then Firen, if Firen's around, he's another Warlord, so it's 5, right? And the odds are just kind of against them, right? To win a tournament, to get that next win that's going to bring them that much closer. And these are guys that fight very, very well. They're very, very competent. And I think if you put them in any other place, they would, without that kind of stacking the odds against them, I think they would already be Sword Knights and Warlords, right? So it kind of depends on where you are and what the skill level of your group and your kingdom is. The way that I like to do it is I like to look at everybody who shows up on that day and decide, okay, what are the stakes here? What is this going to be worth, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a little bit more of the way fencing does this, apparently.
Oh,
I didn't know that, but fencing, if you have Division A, Division B, whatever, like so many people that show up in a certain division could qualify the competitors to achieving that next status. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a little bit better of a way to do it because it's just such a disparity. You can show up, on any given park and have a bunch of Warlords and a bunch of Sword Knights, or not, right? Or not have a bunch of those people. And if that means that you can't have a certain award, well, okay. But at the same point, will it matter? Does it matter if we give this person a 5th, 6th, or 7th? Are they doing all the things they need to do? Are they going to still keep competing, right? A fighter is not just the person that shows up and performs on that day. A fighter is somebody who trains, who reads about fighting, who's thinking about it, right? And I think when you have the rapport, you can make that informed decision. I know that doesn't really answer your question specifically. I mean, because I don't know that we as a sport have really figured out that answer yet. It's tough because what is sufficient competition, right?
Right.
I think it's a term that causes a lot of more problems than it does good, right? But it is something we do have to consider at least somewhat. And so how do we structure that? And then is it the same for everybody, or is it different for everybody? I don't know. I think really all you can do is make that call that day with your park officers. And if you're somebody who is a good fighter, who is a warlord, who is a sword knight, you need to step up and sort of help guide those officers.
That makes sense.
In that respect.
Since we're here, I'll go ahead and put out my my little thing for it. So to me, part of the problem lies in our semantics that we have built into the Orders of the Warrior, right? You touched on it a little bit with the vagueness of the number of participants and the quality of participants and things like that. So what I would push it to would be something like, for First Order, I would keep the battlefield prowess aspect of it all the way up to 4 like it is currently. However, I would add things to each rung. So like First Order could be participating in a Shire level tournament, and then Second Order could be winning a Shire level tournament. And then you do something similar that the higher levels have in the 3rd through, 5th, I think? 4th, 3rd through 5th, something like that. Where you match it to baronial level, right? So Third Order could be having to win Shire again or something, and then 4th is like getting 2nd in a baronial tournament, and then 5th would be winning a baronial tournament. Because then you look at them from like the number of participants based on the size of the park, and that's why I'm a really big proponent in more of a local level tournament scene, so that you can build your fighters up to compete in those kingdom level scenes. But that's going to be a fundamental change, I feel like, to the rules to some degree. Maybe not as big as like a true rules proposal, but like at least way people are looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. And I think just to kind of build on your point and bring up something else, like I think we as a game have to decide what do we want out of our fighters, right? Do we want these like, because fighting, the sport of fighting has kind of become something a little bit different, right? Hasn't it? Right? Like you have warlords, you have sword knights, but then you have like the top 10 that are cross gaming and they're doing other games and they're beating ass in those games. And then they're coming back. Like, is it okay? Do we want to hold our fighters to that standard? Which I would say that has been kind of a problem of the Attitude Era as
yes.
Flow. That's such a great way of putting it. I love that. But it fits. It's perfect descriptor. Or do we want more people that maybe aren't at that high level, but are going to be able to bring up and encourage more people to fight, right?
That's actually like, kind of the argument. God, sorry.
No. I think we're about to say the same thing. Yeah. That's what we kind of have to decide, right? Is like, what is better not only for fighting, but what's better for Amped Guard? What's better for our game? What's going to get more people fighting? What's going to get more people participating, right?
See, that's kind of where my argument for it's tangentially related, right? Because at one point we're trying to make sword belts as a culture in some degree a top national level thing, right? Where top fighters are trying to make sure that they're going to either Olympiad or they're making sure that they're going to big events with the wording in the rule book, right? With the quality of competition. But at the same time, it's not like AICOM or someone like that is granting the sword belts or anything like that. It is each kingdom province granting the belts. So to me, like, if you're a new kingdom and you don't have any warlords near you, who are they going to learn off of or anything like that? So they need someone to look up to in that area. So that person who happens to win those kingdom level events inside their kingdom is a sword belt for that kingdom. And that person can bring up others to raise the bar, so to speak. But a bar needs to be set in a kingdom level, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is the difference. I've heard this described when I went to big national events is the difference between like a national belt or maybe a nationalistic view. Like if you have a sword belt, you're the best in Amped Guard versus you are the best that this kingdom has to offer. And this kingdom might not be fighting wise where, you and Shion and Sane and all of the people that you're rolling with right now are. But that's not the statement that kingdom's making. The statement that they're making is that this is currently the highest skill fighter that they have, and that person can continue growing or whatever. But it's not. I have always viewed it the latter way. I've always viewed it that a sword knight made in a kingdom is that kingdom's best fighter. It's not a declaration of how they are compared to all fighters in all kingdoms. If we wanted to settle something like that, we can have an inter-kingdom event to do it.
I don't know, like Olympiad?
Like Olympiad.
Yeah, I think I agree 100%. And, I like to think about it like, I watch a lot of combat sports. I'm a huge fan of MMA, right?
Same.
And one of the things that recently has been incorporated by the UFC, and I say that relatively recently, is a women's divisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you're going to make it's about fucking time, right?
Yeah.
But anytime you're going to make a new division, right? A new weight class, let's say, you're going to have to build that thing first, right? You're going to have to build it until your Ronda Rousey comes around, right? And is just arm barring girls left and right. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And what does that do? That establishes a bar. That establishes a bar that you must be this good, you must be this competent, right? For that division. That allowed Holly Holm to say, wait, okay, so she's a badass on the ground, but maybe I can kick her in the head.
Right.
Right? Because her hands are good, right? And then you have who? You have Misha Tate after that. And then you have who? You have
is it Thug Rose
freaking
after
Amanda
that?
Nunes.
Yeah.
I think that's I think that's the division underneath. But same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, right? You have to get that ball rolling. And the way you do that is you have to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. You have to start with a bar so that everybody knows. Like I said at the beginning, combat is a game of escalation.
Right.
And one can only escalate and excel if they know what they're shooting for first. You know what I'm saying? So I think that makes a lot of sense, Flo. And I don't know. Maybe we can, in this next round of awards and V9 or whatever that's coming out, maybe something like that would be a boon to the game,
So speaking of, since we have you here, and this is the beginning of our belt talk, there was a new belt that was proposed to Clan this year. I think the idea has been around for a while, of this 5th belt. And this 5th belt would be specific to battle gaming or something along those lines. So I don't want to necessarily dig down into what the criteria to meet that would be or anything like that. Do you think it's a good idea to introduce a new belt into the game? And this is another, at least in some part, it's another fighting belt, right? Fighting, casting, however you want to look at it.
Right.
Do you think it's a good idea to introduce this 5th belt into the game? And, whatever your answer is there, why or why not?
So I'm not necessarily against adding another belt. I am, however, wondering, okay, if we have this problem with sword knights, where sword knights are really hard to make because the bar is this high and you must be a warlord or whatever, and we realize this is a problem, and we realize it probably discourages more people than encourages them to fight, which you still do in battle games. You still fight, right? Why not just open up sword? Why not just open up sword to have a battlefield prowess sort of element to it like it used to be, right? Because you used to have battlefield prowess knights. Again, when I was younger, I was much more of like a cold dead hands. Never. But there's a lot of my own bullshit going on with that. Why not open up sword to be that other alternate pathway and recognize those people? If they don't want to do that, then sure, add a battle game belt, it's fine. If it's going to get more people on the field, if it's going to get more people, bringing people up, I'm all for whatever does that. But I feel like when the problem is sitting here looking at us in the face, why make it overcomplicated? Why add another belt when we can just open up sword and make sword a little bit more contiguous with the rest of Amtgard, right?
I agree with that at least to some degree, right? Like either you open up sword or you get Knight 5, but then you close sword back down would be my suggestion. And then it's strictly a tournament belt, right? So then you only can ladder through it through tournaments would be the way I would fix it. But
well, so it's funny this comes up because during Clan, the battle game belt was actually going to be tied into sword, and overwhelmingly, everyone at Clan was against it. I didn't personally have a preference because I'm not a knight, but there were appeals to tradition. There were people saying that it would, diminish the value of sword belts and everything else, and that it had to be a separate 5th belt because the original proposal was to add a battle game path to sword, which I personally kind of like. And it's interesting to hear you, a sword knight and warlord, also say that when everyone else was like, no, it would diminish the value of sword knight. Do you think that's just it being overvalued, or is that, like you said before, kind of letting ego leave the picture?
I think honestly that it's a consequence of the toxic culture that sword knights have had for so long in this attitude era of Amtgard, right? Of fighting culture specifically, maybe not Amtgard, but fighting culture. People don't want to be the first person to stand up and say, hey, you know what? We're a bunch of assholes. Like we've been assholes, and maybe we should stop being assholes and really think about how we are interacting with Amtgarders and bringing people up, right? Like, are we doing more harm than good here? Nobody wants to be that guy that stands up and isolates themselves from a community that is, already embraced them. So I think it's a byproduct of that. And it wasn't always like this. That's the thing that a lot of people don't remember is you had battlefield prowess knights. Flo, I'm sure you remember there were warlords and there were battlefield prowess knights.
Wasn't that the point of Griffin, I believe?
Yeah, I mentioned Sir Shadow when we were talking to Randall as one of the people that I point to who was a sword knight. At the time that I knew him, absolutely deserved a sword belt, excellent teacher, but at that, and this may have changed since the last time I saw him, it's been a decade now, he was not a warlord. And there was a distinction back then. And anyone that you talk to would very openly say, yeah, guy's sword knight. If Sir Shadow had a pole in his hands, the other side of the ditch line bowed in response. It was like watching a negative bubble inflate on the other side of the ditch field. And there were certain other very specific combinations that he could pick up that he would do that with. He'd never got his warlord. But that doesn't, I don't say that to diminish the work or the skill or anything that he put in, right? It was a difference in perspective that we had then versus what we have now. And it's important to note that it wasn't the same from one kingdom to the next either.
Yeah.
Our kingdoms never had, Neverwinter never had anything like a griffin path to knighthood. It was only the traditional 3 that we've talked about before. You had to get your weapon master, which you got by winning a weapon master. You had to have defender, and you had to have 21 wins in a row to get your warlord. 2 of the 3 to qualify. Yep. And that was all we had.
Yeah, and I'll give you another one. First of all, you're absolutely right about Frank. Frank with a pole is an absolute terror on the ditch line. And we have to treasure that guy because guys, pole is a dying art. 100%. Because of that's another I feel like a consequence of this toxic culture is that people want to do things straight up, swords, shields, maybe 2 swords, single sword. They don't, they would rather do a 1st to 10 or a winners losers rather than go be in a ditch, right? Where a pole is very effective. He is an absolute fucking terror with a pole. And I'll give you another one, Sir Delos. Okay. That guy is not a warlord. he is a sword knight, but that is a guy that not only has the ability to hang with any of the top 10 on any given day, right? And perform very well. That is a guy that can also turn around, teach. He could run a ditch line. He can bring people up. Like, yeah, I don't know, man. To go back to the whole start of this conversation, it just seems like it's like, why make another belt when there's this big problem here? It used to be this way. Like, why do we need that? But again, anything that promotes more people playing Amtgard in a positive way, I'm all for. And if this does it, hell, it's got my support.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what time are we at now? Do we get to story time yet?
Yeah, we're at about an hour and 40 minutes.
So I want to start story time.
We do tend to wrap out our podcast. We try to keep them at around 2 hours, and we try to end with a story time. And I think this is where Flo's going to lead you.
So I want to start with story time. So I want to give Sir Anatole an out here too. We didn't tell him that he was going to have to do a story. So the idea is this is like a funny story that's happened to you at an Amtgard event or on the way or something like that. It can be any story you want. We do ask that the statute of limitation has been reached for any stories that you tell.
I keep insisting that's not a thing.
But so
okay.
So
fair enough.
You
fair
shared
enough.
a triad story earlier. I want to share a wheel story with you, and maybe buy you a little bit of time since we didn't tell you that this was going to be coming. And it's tough. There's so many funny stories that you get over the years that sometimes it's hard to pick one.
Yeah, we get to tell it all the time, and they have to pick one or two.
So, wheel stories. You told a story of Rackus, and some things that happened to you at Rackus with the triad. So, I want to follow it up with a triad story that happened to us at Clan. So the triads decide to go to Clan, and this may be where Clan is always held. I don't know, but this particular clan was on kind of a sloped hill, and we met the wheels for the first time that I remembered. I did not connect that you were the same person that we had fought at Rackus. And so we're coming from Tennessee and in one of the lower spots in Tennessee at that. And we go all the way up, we drive all the way up to the top of the mountain there, in, I think it was Cloudcroft that we were in, somewhere around there. And, we can't breathe. I don't know a good way to describe it to the listeners here. It's not that when you breathe, it hurts. It doesn't. It's just that you have this oxygen reserve in your body that you don't realize is there until you go up to the top of Cloudcroft, New Mexico, where you don't recover at the same rate. The energy that you expend doesn't come back at the rate that it should, at the rate you're used to, from living at, I'm going to say we're at 900 feet above sea level or so right here. And so we go up there and we fought all day. We got there, we opened the ditch up, and it's getting later in the day. And who shows up but Sir Anatole and Sane. I don't think Shion was there at this time, and we're fighting around with them, and it's me and Gunn that are out on the field at this point, and we're jawing back and forth at one another, and Anatole starts having this conversation with Shion in sort of this third-person air. Anatole starts having this conversation with Sane in sort of this third-person air, like, Sane, have you ever noticed that the triangles don't seem to move around very much? And Sane says, you are correct. Triangle is not a mobile object, though. I believe that has something to do with it. And so that's become a meme in my company. The triangle is not a mobile object. And the other thing that I remember from that day is we were so tired that footwork just wasn't a thing. Like, Gunn and I actually, when we were getting some water, sat down and was like, okay, we can't. We're on a slight slope. We're both exhausted at this point. We're going to have to cut back on our footwork because this is how you get hurt. Is you accidentally stumble and roll your ankle or something like that. And Gunn and I are both over 6 feet. We're both heavier, though mine is mostly because I'm fat and his is mostly because he is yoked. And so we're working on I was like, I'm just going to work on my arm blocks for the rest of the day. I'm going to work on arm blocks and catching blocks before I throw. And Anatole happened to be lined up across from me. So I'm doing a heavy fake to my left. And if I hope that this makes sense when I describe it, but Florentine, usually you want to pick where the person is going to be shooting. This is true for all forms of combat, but Florentine in particular, because I don't have a big board protecting half my body, I need to choose which lane Anatole is going to be shooting towards. So I had my left arm out and tilted in such a way that it looked like it was easy to get around, to get an outside wrap on my forearm. And it's a lever action. So left arm comes back and right arm, also holding a sword, comes forward and taps down on the arm as it goes for it. Right? So, and I do this, I catch Anatole with it the first time. And after that, I go to throw it again because I'm not thinking. I'm so oxygen deprived at this point that I literally did the exact same thing twice in a row. And Anatole stopped. He started to throw and he stopped and took a couple steps back and cocked his head to the side like a dog who had just now figured out that the master had not thrown the ball and was not going to throw the ball. And he, again, turning to Sane, who was sitting beside him, Sane, I think that the triangles are doing the exact same move over and over again. Oh, yes, says Sane, who hasn't fought me and I wasn't even aware had been watching me. That hand fake that he's been doing is what he's been doing for the past 15 minutes now. And now I'm in my own head. Has it been 15 minutes that I've been doing the same move over and over again? Gunn joins in with them. Yeah, you have, man. At 15 minutes and you haven't changed it up at all. What is going on here? I hate this place. So
yeah, what you just described there is literally that is the wheel's greatest secret weapon, man, is the elevation. It's the elevation. Not necessarily the fighting, but like we have been killing Texans that way for years now.
We've been killing Texans that way.
Years now, man. And they're like, they're so creative. They're so fast. It's like, well, I live at 7,300 feet. Like, it's not that I'm fast. It's that you're dying. You're straight up dying. Yeah. And then I'll tell them something glib like, oh, no, dude, you can live without oxygen for 2 weeks. Or something like that.
But no, so this was what made all of that memorable is we had already, in a very short time, and maybe in that way that you only can on a ditch field, gotten to know each other in such a way that we were making fun. We were cutting jokes with one another and making fun. And it was fun being in this environment where we were all in an ultra competitive mode. This was the first time that we'd been out to clan, but we were able to have fun with it. You know, after you killed somebody, you joke around or make fun of the fact that they threw the same fake again or something like that. And I remember you saying, when we had finally finished up and we were starting to walk away, coming over and shaking my hand and saying, you know what? It was a whole lot of fun getting to fight you guys. I really hope that we get to meet again.
That's super cool because that's something that I had thought of, previously running tournaments and stuff like that. We don't do that kind of stuff very often, so that's really cool that you're already doing that.
Well, it is, and so I've reached a point in Amtgard at this point. This was 5 or 6 years ago, I think. I don't get starstruck. I don't have heroes. I was really able to evaluate this on a level of, look how cool this person is being. Coming up, didn't have to come up and say thanks afterwards. Didn't have to come and shake my hand or anything like that. But taking the time, those small gestures, just to come over and say, hey, man, you were a lot of fun to fight. I hope you keep at it. Hope to see you again. Something like that. That had an impact on me. That had an impact. You had already become someone that I respected from what I'd seen on the ditch field. But then this was a whole nother level of respect as a person, not just as a fighter. So thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you too, because hey, it takes two to make a thing go right. It takes two to make a thing out of sight, right? That's a lot of something. Yeah, right? It takes two, and you can really feel that. Not to be a total hippie about it, but you can really feel when the energy is there, right? And when you're both just grooving. The worst part about it is that you have to stop fighting.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like what you're making together and the thing you're doing, and like that. It makes my fucking soul sing in a way that very few things do.
Yeah.
Right. And then we have to stop because somebody won.
Yeah.
And that sucks, right? Like that's like, and I remember that. And it's, it's a mixed bag out there. You fight some people that really, like you go to clan or something and there's some dude in a wife beater with like basketball shorts he hasn't washed in a couple decades, and he's looking at you and you're looking at him and you're like, okay, like we're going to throw down with questionably legal swords and this is going to be that kind of fight. I don't really like those kind of fights though. I like more of the fights that we had, right? Where we're all out there, we're competitive, we're trying to win, but more than anything, we're trying to push ourselves and we're trying to enjoy this thing that we all love and the way we all love to do it. And that's the shit I live for, man. And I do remember that. And thank you for being that kind of fighter, because like I said, very few things really make my soul sing like good fights. And that was one of them. That was a very good time. So, thank people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was, and I'm gonna reiterate something that Michael said to us when we were on. It takes one person to change a ditch line. It takes one person to kill frustration and hate and things like that, and you can be that one person.
Mm-hmm. You really can. No matter your time in the game or your proficiency or whatever, you can still be that person, right?
Yep. So I tried to buy you some time.
Yeah, I'm over here racking my brain. Yeah, it's tough because there are so many stories, right? So many crazy stories. Not all of them in the statute of limitations.
Yeah,
but,
right. Let me see if I can help. So, do you have one that is one that you and your company bros that's your go-to funny story?
You talked about the statute of limitations already.
Yeah. Let's stay away from the company. Actually, I would like to share a story, and it's not with my company bros, even though there's a million stories there. It was with the One Grind Nation, the OGN, and it's not necessarily a funny story, but it is probably one of the coolest fucking things that this game that I've had the privilege of experiencing because of being who I am and getting to go places and teach people about stick tag, right? Is we went up to Canada and we went up to a place in Canada called Shuswap. And there are some people, this is reservation land up there, right? This is like traditional reservation land. And there was a gentleman there who hosted us on his property on this land. And it was like oh my God, it was incredibly beautiful. There was a river, there were mountains, trees, like eagles flying around. It was, as far as Amtgard goes, it was a very, very small park, and a very small park that was very new to Amtgard, So that love of Amtgard that only really comes from like the newest of the new kids, right? The newest of the newbies. That was like the vibe up there. And it was amazing to be able to participate. But this gentleman who had us, on his land, which was, his traditional family land for generations and generations and generations, is a Native American gentleman. He decided as a thank you, he would take me, M-Hog, Sponge, Delos was there, Sir Lanky was there, Dasserith was there, a group of other people that were local to the area. He wanted to take us and show us something up on the mountain. So we all get in the back of this pickup truck and we go straight up this fucker. And when I say steep, like, as I was going up this mountain, I was legitimately having the conversation with myself of like, well, I guess this isn't a terrible way to die. If we just like, there are worse ways, right? Like, I was trying to rationalize being in this truck. He's flying on up this like pretty poorly maintained dirt road. Grouse are flying out of the brush. Like, I'm thinking we're going to hit something. Bushes are whacking us in the face in the back of this pickup truck. And I'm just there being like, it was a good run. It was a real good run. But what he did is he took us to the top of this mountain and he showed us this rock face up at the summit. And on the rock face were paintings that his people have been doing for 800 years, 900 years, something crazy like that, right? Like, this is his traditional people that have been taking this place and assigning this significance to it, this spiritual significance, this cultural significance. And his way of saying thank you was to come share this with us. And not only, it was the people I was with, it was the place I was in, but very few things in this game have really reached that level for me of just being super honored to be there, humbled and privileged, and being aware of that at the same time. And when I think of special things that have happened in this game, like that's right up there with me. So shout out to the Shuswap. And they even gave us, oh man, I wish I had it here. I think it's put away, but they gave us these little belt favors. And there's like a Thunderbird that's painted up there on the mountain, and they made it their park symbol and turned it into a belt favor. And I have that. Amazing. I think I have it like next to my Warlord favor, next to my Sword Knight scroll, because it was just that important to me, right? Like, that was such an intimate thing to share. And I still am incredibly honored that I got to experience that. So not necessarily like a funny story, but
but a very cool one.
That beats the shit all the other ones we have.
Right.
Who's going to follow that up? Well, thanks for ending the Storytime segment forever. Because good luck following that up. Holy shit, that's awesome.
It was he did not need to do that, right? Like, we were already over the moon on these guys. They were, super new, but they were super excited. They treated us like kings. Like, they put us up, they fed us. They didn't need to do that. Right. And for them to go that extra mile and take us to this guy's home, like, it was unbelievable. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah. The stuff like that, this has been a reoccurring theme on the podcast this week, but little things can have big impacts. The you guys choosing to come up there, you guys making good impression when you did, because the attitudes were where they needed to be, and it led to that experience that you had, which, I mean, this is one of those things that you'll remember for the rest of your life, Yeah,
absolutely.
Easily. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, shout out to those guys, man. They're badass.
Do we know if there's still a park?
I mean, COVID makes everything interesting, right? I don't know if they're currently a park. And I know the gentleman's name is Travis. And I think his Amtgard name is Dasadect. I'm probably mispronouncing that. He is Dasareth, who was just made a Sword Knight up there not too long ago. His squire. That's his squire up there. And just like the nicest guy you'll ever meet, super welcoming, a lot of potential to become a very good fighter as well. But yeah, I couldn't believe that he would share that with us, and yeah.
That's amazing. I don't know that we can end on a higher note than that, to be really honest with you.
I do have one thing that I want to do in closing. Yeah. And it's just to make a couple of call outs here. You mentioned One Grind Nation. Sir Anatole has a podcast that he does called Stab Chats. It is excellent. You should all go check it out. One Grind Nation in general is a great place to go to as an online resource. We were discussing that earlier. They have a lot of talks with people that have been in the game for a long time and videos from some of the greatest minds that have ever played our game that are breaking down some fundamental things all the way up to very complex combinations and shots that you can run through. Their training videos are up online as well. So both of those are wonderful resources for anyone that is interested in bettering themselves as a fighter. And I want to thank you for being our first guest for our sword belt introduction. It was so much fun talking to you. I hadn't got to speak in a long time, and I think, is this the first time that the two of you have been able to?
Supposedly it's not now, but
I guess you've met many years ago. But first time in a long time that we've been able to speak. And Cabbage was new. It was so much fun having you on. Thanks again for all of your insights, and especially for the story at the end there. It's a different kind, but I think maybe a more important one than we've had on the show so far. Do you want to say anything to close us out?
Well, no, I think he said it. Check out One Grind Nation on Facebook. You can put One Grind Nation in there. Yep. You can find Stab Chats the same way, or you could go to patreon.com/One Grind Nation, and that will take you to the podcast. Guys, I had a great time. I'm honored to be on. This was it's stuff like this that keeps motivation during this time going, right? That inspires people. I know when you guys did Imhog and when you guys did Randall, like that was so inspiring to me and really encouraged me to kind of look towards that light at the end of the tunnel. You know, we're all going to get through this. Yep. We just have to take care of each other and keep that fire burning. So thank you guys very much. I had a great time.
Yeah, thank you. Links to One Grind Nation, to Stab Chats, to the Patreon will be in the episode description on both Spotify and YouTube. So check down below, I guess. Wherever you're seeing this is probably down below. And you can get a link straight to that. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on YouTube or Spotify to get notified about new episodes. And make sure to follow us on Facebook for announcements and more.